You're going to start off with your silk, and this is the type of silk that I was talking about briefly in the intro. You're going to take the whole thing off. Okay, don't cut it whatsoever. You're going to start off with the whole length. So I'll just get this out now. The size you need is going to depend on the size of your pearls. You can see that I'm using a 0.6, a number 4. This is usually the kind of size you'll be looking at. If you're using a heavier pearl, you're probably going to want to use a slightly bigger one. And if you're going to be using tiny pearls, obviously you're going to have to use a smaller size, but number 4 is pretty much the standard. So I've got the whole thing out of the packet, and you can see that it comes with this needle attached, but we're not going to bother with this end for the minute, obviously, because we want to tie a knot in the other end. So I'm just going to pick up, I'm just going to put all of this off to one side for now, and I'm carefully picking up the other end. And all we're going to do is a simple overhand knot, just a knot like you do anywhere else. You just make a loop, poke the end up through, pinch the end with your finger, and then you're just going to make a little knot like that, and you want to pull it really firmly. Now at this point you need to check that your silk is not too small for the holes in your pearls. Now I'm using black pearls and black silk for this demo because obviously I'm filming on a white background and I thought it'd be easier for you to see. So I'm just going to pick up the first of my pearls and I'm just going to check. Now also what I have done with this pearl and one other is I have taken a little reamer, and this is just like a little bead reamer, and I have gone into the end, you can see where I've done it, and I've done this with 2 of them, gently just kind of making the hole bigger, because you want to make sure that the silk is going to pass through the pearls twice. You need 2 pearls. You can do it with up to 4 or 5 if you choose, but a minimum of 2 pearls in which you can get that silk through twice, and this will become apparent in a moment. So all I'm doing, again, very carefully, I'm not pushing. You can see on my finger here, look, the dust that's coming out of this pearl as I'm doing it. So this is a very cheap little reamer. I get through a few of these actually. I also have some beautiful lovely beadsmith reamers which are here, and you can see that that's got a lovely spiral on it, and that one is really good, especially if you've got tiny holes. You just kind of bore it into it and make it bigger that way. So I really enjoy using those ones as well. That has saved me on quite a few. So you can see that I've made this hole a little bit bigger. That's really important to have reamed them before you test them on your silk. So what I'm going to do, just take that little needle and drop it. So we're going to pick it back up. I'm going to feed it into that little hole, and you can just feed it all the way through, like so. You might find that it's kinked a little bit when it's been wrapped around the cardboard. There you go. It took me a little while. I got there in the end. And you can see I'm just pulling that through, but I'm pulling that quite firmly, so I want to make sure that that's not going to come off. That's good. I know it's not, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull it back a little bit, and now I want to dab a bit of glue on this knot just to secure it. Now I'm going to use a little fabric glue. You can use hypo cement, there are many others, but the one I'm using is just like it's just a crafter's pick fabric glue. There are many, as long as it's going to dry clear, it doesn't matter. Now what I'm going to do, because I'm using a tube, I'm just going to take the top off, like so, and have a bit of wire, because I've always got loads of wire handy. Just going to get a little dab, there's too much on there. This gives me a little bit more control, and we know I love a bit of control. I think that's the mum part of me. I'm going to pick up that little knot, and because I've got this tiny thing, now they're using the wire, or if you're using the hypo cement, that it has a precision end. Using the wire just allows you to have a little bit more control where it goes, but also when you have pearls next to each other and you're just dabbing a bit of glue to finish, which you'll see in a minute, it's useful for that. So I'm just going to put the wire off to one side, put the lid back on my glue. Now I have to let this dry. Now obviously I'm not going to want that to stick to the surface or anything, so I tend to just kind of hang it over the end. You can't see here, but I'm just going to hang it over the end of the table and just let that dry, and when it's dry in a moment we'll just continue. Now while we're waiting for that knot to dry, we're going to cut ourselves a little bit of French wire. Now this is quite springy. I'm trying to keep my hands really still because I've got it quite focused in. And you can see it kind of springs, and that's really, really important. It's basically a coil of really, really closely wound, tight knit wire. And I'm using sterling silver. Now I think it's really important. I'm just going to carefully, so it doesn't lose focus, move it away. I think it's really important to use sterling silver gimp or French wire if you're using a sterling silver clasp. It makes no sense to not have this silver as well, because you want to use silver throughout your whole piece. If you're not using a precious metal, then yeah, you can get the cheaper wire, but to be fair, it lasts a while because you're not going to use much every time. You're going to need a centimetre, or just slightly under a centimetre even, for each end. So you'll use 2 centimetres of this wire per piece you make. Now you can cut it with your little snips, or you can just use your wire cutters. It's entirely up to you. Obviously I'm much more happy using my wire cutters, so I'm just going to gently cut that off and then put the little bit down there like so. Whoop, see if it will focus on it. Well, it probably won't, it's struggling now. And then I'm just going to put the rest of it back on its little pot. Now I have a little pot specifically for my sterling silver one, and I put a little anti-tarnish square in there as well. It's quite important to try and keep it as neat as possible. You can see I've actually just kinked that bit there with my hand, but that's fine because that's actually pretty much perfect for the end of this necklace that I'm going to be making for you. So I'm now just going to put this away, and then we're going to carry on because I think the knot's dry now. Okay, so we're ready to start. For this bit, you're going to need your little bit of French wire, decorative bead if you're planning to use it, your clasp, your silk, and your reamed pearls. I'm just using 2 for the purpose of this demo. So first thing we're going to do is pick up one of your pearls. Just going to hold it. I'm going to get my silk with a little bit of with the needle on the end, and I'm going to just thread it through, and I'm pulling, you can see I'm just pulling that silk through. It comes really easy. I know you've got lots and lots and lots of silk, so do make sure it's not going to knot as you tug it, because you don't really want to knot where you don't want it. When you've got that through, you're just going to pick up your second pearl. You can see it's on there. I have not pulled it all the way up to the end or anything, and I haven't trimmed that off. So we're going to pick up our second pearl and thread that on as well, like so. Put it all the way down, so it's nearly at the end. I'll move that over. And now you want your bead, because that's going to sit next to your last pearl, like so. And again, as you're pulling it, you want to make sure that this silk isn't knotting. So I have it kind of, it hooked around 2 fingers as I pull, and that's just to stop it. If you can see that it's just hooked around there, and that just tends to help it not actually kink behind it. And then they're sat next to each other like so. I'm not really worried about pulling them up tight at the moment. I'm now just picking up, you see my hands are quite hot, so I'm just going to stick it to my finger, pick up the little bit of French wire. I'm going to pull this, I'm going to put this needle through this French wire. This is a little bit fiddly, but there you go. There we are. It's just threading it on and threading it over that needle. Now, if you've been doing a lot of knotting, you can end up with it getting a little bit baggy there, so watch out when you're pulling your French wire over it, that doesn't just grab there, and then you end up with it all uncoiling, and nobody has any fun when that happens. It can happen. Again, it's all just practice doing this sort of thing. and it is very rewarding. There's something so therapeutic I find about knotting pearls. So that's all sat next to that little bead now. I move it up. I want to pull this out again so we've got a bit of a tail, and you'll see why afterwards. So now I've got my clasp. You can see I'm using one of these. Do excuse me not naming this kind of clasp because I'm having a neuro moment. I can't for the life of me think what it's called. It's not a lobster, that's for sure. So I'm just threading that on as well. There we go. And I want that to sit kind of on top of the French wire. So again, I'll pull that forward so you can see. You have your little order of your French wire with your clasp, your bead, and then your 2 pearls. So now this is the fun bit, is you're going to pick up your needle. That was a good big long pause there. And you're going to push this needle. You're not going to push it back through any of this lot, not pushing it back through your wire. You're going to put it back through the bead. So I find it quite helpful to just pick it up. You can see there. So what I'm doing is I'm just pushing this needle back through that bead, and I want to pull it and I've let go. You must make sure you've got clean hands when you're doing this, especially with white silk, because otherwise you're going to mark that silk. I know I didn't say that earlier, but I really did think that probably went without saying. But then I don't think you lot are a grubby bunch, so we'll be alright, won't we? Okay, so I'm just starting to pull that, but I don't want to pull it too tight right at the moment. So now I have it back through that bead. I'm just going to get hold of this first pearl. First, second, I don't know, here we go. It's because it's the second thing I'm sticking the needle through. So it's confusing me. So I'm just going to pull this through here. So it's going back through that pearl again. Again, watching out for that silk kinking. But it's just, I just love the feel of it. I know I'm a bit weird, but I love the feel of it actually going through there. It feels, and then as you pull that now, can you see that loop forming? And you've got a little loop there, perfectly, with your clasp attached. And yeah, you've got a big gap at the moment, but we're not worried about that. So, what I'm now going to do is, now I've got this where I want it, is I am going to make a loop around that. So you're just basically making a knot at the base of this pearl. Got to make a loop around that, finding the end of the needle, taking the needle up through that loop, and I am now going to pull that firmly and tightly, so we have a knot right at the base. Now I'm not using an awl. Some people like to use an awl, but I'm not. What I tend to do is just push it up, and I'm using the second one there. I push it up with my thumbnail as I put it tight, so because it was got caught around. So what I want is I just want it really, really closely up against that. Some people find it easier at that point to get a little awl in there and just push it up at the same time as they're pulling that thing tight. Now you can see that I've got quite a death grip on my silk here, and I'm pushing it really tightly up against there. But you'll be thinking, well, why is it all baggy? That makes no sense. What we're going to do now is start threading your needle again through this second pearl, like so. That one's all safely knotted on. So we're going to do that like that. Put it through. This is the bit, if you haven't reamed this one properly, where you might say a few rude words because you can't get it through the second time. And then you're just going to pull it up like so. You don't have to sing a little song, that's fine, that's not obligatory. So we're just going to pull that up. Now I want to make sure at this point that I'm sliding it all the way up to that. So now it's really, really close to the next one. I want it as tight as possible. So now I'm going to dangle it over my hand, make a little loop, and I'm just going to put it through. So I'm basically putting a knot All the time I'm keeping that really, 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 really firmly there. Now I'm holding one part of the loop against that pearl with my finger as I'm pulling it. You don't want to go behind, but I'm doing that all the time because what I want is for it to be perfectly tightly up against that pearl. Some people use knotting machines, but I don't really get on with those. I much prefer to do it by hand and make sure it's really, really tightly up against there. Not the easiest thing to do because I usually do it holding it in a different way because I'm not trying to demonstrate it to camera. So yeah, I'm just going to pull that really, really firmly. You don't want to let go, so I'm just easing it in place like so. And you can see now that we have your first two knotted nice and firmly together. And what you want to do, because you've got this tail obviously, is you're now going to put a little bit more of your glue. So I'm just going to open my glue with one hand. I didn't tightly screw it up. Pick up my little bit of wire and then I'm going to get that in. Oh, you don't want to do that. You really don't want to drop it on there. And I'm just going to dab it on this little knot here, just to make sure that that doesn't come undone. So you can see why people might use more than two pearls to ream, because if you carry on and you do another one, so if you had like 3 or 4 before that knot and you went through them all, and what I'm now going to do is also gently get that in there. I don't really want any on, look, I've got some on the pearl, but what I'll do in a minute is very, very, very carefully wipe it off. These are quite big Baroque pearls and my hands have got a bit of a tremor today, so that's not helping. But here I'm just going to wipe it off around, because we don't want it on the pearl whatsoever. Okay, so now you're just going to let that dry for a little bit and then we're going to continue knotting. So the knots have dried now and they only take a couple of minutes. And before you continue, you're just going to trim this off really, really closely against the knot, like you did at the end. I do need some new clippers. Get rid of that little bit there. And then before you carry on, dab a bit of that, and then technically you should wait for that to dry before you continue as well. But I do love this fabric glue because it does dry very, very quickly. So when that's dry, you're going to start just threading the rest of your pearls on like before. So picking up the end of your needle, threading your pearl on, pulling it through. Here we go. Pulling it up so it sits neatly against there. Now I have then, I don't know if you saw what I did, I've just dangled that over the edge of my hand, so you can see the pearls just kind of dangle over the edge of my hand. So now I'm taking that to make a loop. So the pearls are down there, the silk is coming around on top of the pearls like that. So you've just made a loop around your fingers. You're going to pull up those pearls and you're going to drop it through that loop. Okay, so what that does is you start to form that knot. And again, I'm holding my thumb firmly against that pearl while I'm doing it, so that you just basically finding out where the thing is, and then and then we're just going to pull that up. Make sure your pearl's neat, really, really, really firmly against the previous one, and just push it with your finger and your thumb until it is really, really tight, and that's your first pearl on. And then you're just going to continue. So here we have our start of our necklace with the 3 pearls. I'm just going to knot a couple more before I move on to showing you how to finish. So literally it's the same thing, just going to slide one of those, put it all the way through, quite careful not to let it all, because you have quite a lot of it there. Tangle, you can see I'm pulling it through. Again, really, really important if you're using white silk, have clean hands. Pushing it up really firmly with my thumb, And you can see that that's quite rigid there. That's good, we want it as tight as possible. So again, dropping, that's quite fast, wasn't it? So just dropping the pearl over there, taking the silk all the way around but above the pearls, then lifting the pearls over that loop and dropping it down through the centre. Now I find that especially as the necklace gets longer, just having a little gap between your fingers means that you can just drop the rest of the necklace through. And now you're just going to, you see I pull the remaining bit of the silk, hold on to it, and I'm going to put my thumb kind of in the middle of that loop there. It's because I want to try and hold that knot while I'm beginning to put it tight with my thumb. Then I switch. Now, you don't know if you spotted that, but then I switched to holding that knot, which is now just sat on top of the pearl. I'm switching to holding the knot against there, yet Charlie agrees with me, while I'm gently pulling the silk. All the time I am bracing that knot against the pearl. Now a lot of people like to use awls, so as you get the knot quite close to where I showed you that I was switching over, at that point when you have an open knot, if I pull another pearl on, I'll show you what I mean. It's at that point, if you have an open knot, people quite often put a little awl or a needle. I wouldn't recommend a needle quite so much, but and just to brace it against there while you're tightening your knot. So again, pearl over there, silk coming around over the top, so you can see there's the pearl, there's the silk for the loop. So if I then turn my hand, I'm going to pick up the pearls and I'm dropping that over there and through the loop, and that creates the knot. And then just slip it off my fingers, having my thumb in there, bracing the pearls, making sure, it's just going out of focus, making sure those pearls stay quite firmly together, and then switching. Now it's at this point where you have this open knot that is sat there that some people like to use an awl. I don't use one. I've got like a beadsmith knotting tool. I don't actually use a knotting tool either. So what they would do is just hold the awl in there to brace that knot up against the pearl. That might work for you. It doesn't work for me. I find it a lot easier to get a closer knot purely by using my fingers. I don't know whether it's a sensory thing. I just feel a little bit more confident if I'm bracing it myself and I can get that knot a bit closer. I mean, if you like, there are tools like knot a bead and things like that that allow you to knot necklaces, and some people prefer that. And the thing about jewelry making is finding out what works for you. Now you've seen me do like 3 of these now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to knot it to pretty much the end, and then I'm going to show you how to finish off with the chain, and well, I'll get back to you when I have finished knotting this necklace, or nearly so. So you can see I've knotted pretty much to the end of the necklace. I'm just going to put one more pearl on to show you what I mean about holding the pearls when you've got a great big long necklace, and then I'll show you how to finish off the other end. So again, just finding that needle, going to thread this lovely pearl on there. I do adore a black pearl actually, and then they're very popular as well. And I'm just pulling that silk through. And you can see that I have the bottom of the silk curled around my hand like so. That just helps to stop it kinking. Now, here we have the big necklace. Just going to hang it over my hand as before. Bring that around. Nice big gap between the fingers. Pull that up and drop the end through that gap. And just pull it through like so. And then we start forming that knot as before. So if I just put that up there, you can see the knot forming around my thumb. Pushing that down, holding it in with that finger as we switch, pushing it up against the pearl constantly with this thumb was keeping the pearls really tightly together to the last pearl, so you're not going to end up with a big baggy bit between the knot and the pearl. And there you go, it's in perfectly. So now I'm going to show you how to finish off that necklace with your other side of the clasp, or in this case the chain, because I'm using this side. So you should have 3 pearls left. Well, I've got 4 because I'm going to use another one for a drop as well, 2 of which I have reamed. You can ream all 3 of them if you want. So I've just mixed them up in my hand, so I've got to work out which ones are reamed. That one, and looks like that one. So I'm going to thread all 3 of these on, like so. Just going to thread them on. Again, you want to make sure that the silk is going to pass through 2 of them. I'm going to thread them on. There we go. Pulling that silk all the way through. Like that, making sure that's up nice and closely, but we'll worry about that in a minute when we've got the last one on. Thread it on when I can find a black hole on a black pearl. There we go. All the way through. Oh, look, it's trying to form a knot. So if that happens, then you just stop pulling and you just tease that silk. This is why we tend to be really, really careful. So you just want to tease that silk apart so that we don't actually have a fully formed knot where we don't want it. Okay. That will teach me for not looking what I'm doing. Right, because what you don't want to do, should you get a knot, is to then pull it tight and have it there, but also you don't want to cut it off. So there you go. If it starts to form a knot like that, you can just ease it apart. And now I'm just going to push that pearl all the way up, and now you're going to need about 2 centimeters of curb chain, or the other end of your clasp. Now I like curb chain for this because it's got decent size loops, or you pick one with decent size loops for your clasp to go through. You're going to need your little decorative bead if you use one on the other side, and your little bit of French wire. So you notice these 3, well, that one hasn't got a knot after it, and these 2 don't have any knots at all. So I'm just going to thread my decorative bead on first, like so. So I'm just doing that so my hand aren't in the short. Decorative bead is on. Take the end, and at this point you're going to put your little bit of French wire on. Right, trying to get a tiny needle through a tiny hole. There we go. Just sliding that on, gripping the whole thing again between thumb and forefinger and pulling it through. And that's quite important because, again, like I said before, you don't want it to snag. And that's going to go all the way down to the end. And now you're going to pick up your chain, and you're just going to thread your needle through the bottom, or the end loop. So you can just see it there. It's like dangling off the loop. So I'm just going to pull this very carefully all the way through, because we don't want another knot, or attempted knot like before. I want that to just sit on that bit of French wire. And now I am going to pick up the end, take the needle through the silver bead, push, pulling it through like so. It's going to determine it wants to kink today, so I'm pulling that through, not completely tightly yet. Now I want to move that bead down to where I want it, and then keep repositioning this while I'm pulling, still not wanting it to quite form that loop. So at this point we're getting close to where we want to be. I'm now going to turn my hand so you can see what I'm doing, hopefully, and I'm going to put that needle through the first of the 2 pearls without knots in. and give it a good pull to get it through. There we go. That's the bit that you don't want it to stick at, because you want to have reamed that well enough. Yeah, yes, good boy Charlie, he says. If you haven't watched me before, I have a parakeet called Charlie, and he always tries to voice photobomb, if you like. He always tries to get in on the tutorials, so he's just making his presence felt. Now, as you can see, as I pulled that lovely loop has just formed at the end of the necklace. So you have now, hopefully, if there's a little bit of a gap like there is there, it's not too bad because you're going to put a knot in there, but you can just squeeze them together a bit more and then pull that a little bit tighter. And now I'm going to take my silk all the way around the pearl, and then the needle up through the loop, because you're just basically making a knot in between those two. Pearls, try not to get your chain caught in your knot, because you wouldn't want to do that. It does happen. And then you want to pull that really quite firmly, like so. And then I'm going to, if you heard that screaming, that's my twins are out on the trampoline, having a great time because the weather is beautiful. I'm going to take this needle through that second pearl that doesn't have a knot after it. Give it a good pull, like so, pulling that silk all the way through. Again, try and make sure it doesn't get caught around that chain at the bottom, and pull it, and pull it, pull your finger, and pull it, and pull it, and there we go. And now finally making, turning a hand around just so I can make a knot a bit easier, taking that I want to say wire all the time, silk, all the way around this knot, grabbing the end of your needle and taking your needle up through the loop you have just made by taking the silk around that pearl that you want to knot in between, and then you're just going to pull that knot tight. Make sure it goes in the right place. Give it a good pull like so. Get it up there really firmly. Now, again, you're going to want your glue, so I'm just going to put those down. Before you cut anything off, it's time to pick up your glue. And if you're using the precision tip, you can just squeeze it in, or if you'd like me, again, you don't like the precision tip, you can just dab it on the wire. Now I get a bit of a hand trimmer. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, I may have done. I get a bit of a hand trimmer, so using a precision tip, while you might think that would be quite a useful thing, for me it's not, because I can involuntarily squeeze the tube. Whereas here I've only got a little bit on the end of a piece of wire, a little bit of glue on the end of a piece of wire, so that limits the damage that can be done, if you like. So if I have any excess, it's at this point that I'm just going to wipe it off carefully, like so. Now you want to let that dry, and then when you dry it, you're going to trim it off. Now because we're doing this, I'm going to just trim this off now. Normally I would let that dry for 5 to 10 minutes depending on the glue, or just go away for half an hour and come back. But because I'm doing it on camera for you guys, I'm going to trim it off. I am also, after I finish this, going to go and order myself some more of those snips, because my ones are finally given up the ghost. So now you've let all of that dry and trimmed it off, just a little bit of a decorative touch, you can, yeah, good boy Charlie, you can take another little tiny pearl or a pearl from the same strand if you manage to save one back. Just thread it on a head pin. You are a good boy Charlie. Make a 45-degree angle with your thumbnail, and then just make a little loop around the end of your head pin like so, And then when you've got your little loop at this stage, before you finish off your dropped loop, we're just going to thread it onto the end of your chain like so, and then you can grip this with your chain nose pliers like so, and then go all the way around, and then we can just trim it off and we are done. I'll just get my clippers and we'll trim that and then squeeze it, and then you have finished your pearl necklace. I say I want to trim it off, it doesn't want to trim. Again, there we go. Didn't quite get it in there. Get my chain nose pliers in and just squeeze that shut. Charlie's blowing you all kisses now. And then you have a little decorative dangle at the back. Now that's quite useful for the ladies as well, because they can feel where the end of the chain is when they're trying to put this necklace on by themselves. And having it extendable also allows them quite a wider choice of outfits they can use it with. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Thank you.